when we say we're going to we have an ironclad agreement with Israel no matter what, they have a divine right to defend themselves. It's like, okay, sure, theoretically. How many innocent civilians are you allowed to kill in the name of defense? That question is not answered. That red line is not drawn, and it's absurd. That's what pisses me off.
Yeah.
Because we mourn for innocent Gazans. No, you fucking don't. If you are not going to say, well, there's no number of Gazans who would be killed that would be too many for us because we're defending ourselves. Like, first off, Israel continues to have every right to burn alive every Hamas terrorist in their territory, as far as I'm concerned.
Sure.
In whatever way they want. Once the threat has been neutralized, and now we're talking about moving into Gaza, that's no longer defense.
It totally becomes offense.
Yeah, if there's active rocket installations, okay. And, of course, the IDF will say every single target, every single bomb we've dropped was on an active military target. There just happen to be civilians there. It's like, why should I believe that? It very much bothers me that we say we have an ironclad commitment with Israel no matter what. It's like, why is that the case exactly? Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. Sure. Radical Islam is a problem. Duh. Like 5 or 10 years ago, that was like a controversial position. Oh, you're criticizing Islam. It's like, no shit, we were right to criticize Islam. And so I understand that, and I also understand from the perspective of Israel, Israel would not exist without the backing of the United States. So it is obviously in their interest to influence and lobby the United States for their benefit, which is exactly what happens.
Yeah.
And whether it's, it's AIPAC, I believe it is, what is it? American Israel Political Action Committee or whatever.
Yep.
The Israel lobby broadly. They absolutely exert a significant amount of influence over U.S. foreign policy. And that is a problem. I don't think any other country has the degree of influence that they do. Now, again, not many other countries have the necessity to influence the United States. Like the UK doesn't need the United States backing as much as Israel does to survive. But I do not like that criticism of Israel and criticism of Netanyahu and criticism of radical Judaism, which is the equivalent of radical Islam, is somehow met with accusations. Oh, whoa, what are you, anti-Semitic or something? Or,
yeah, well, that's been happening for forever. I mean, every group, if they can, likes to appeal to pity. If you can get it, if you can turn every accusation against your government, against any policy, you can reframe it
bigotry.
As, oh, well, you're just bigoted against us as a people. And it is an effective defense to appeal to shame and pity like that. And it's pathetic, but groups do it. I've always been very...
Because it works.
Yeah, because it works. And I've always been very outspoken against the government of Israel, but that has nothing to do with Jewish people as human beings. It's purely the policy,
the people who are arguably most... who hate the current Israeli government more than anyone, and who are the victims of the Israeli government's policies, are Jewish people.
Yeah.
And it's, it is the radical right-wing Orthodox arm that does all this crazy shit about rebuilding the Temple Mount and, believing that they're God's chosen people and their rights matter more, which is what Itamar Ben-Gvir said explicitly. My rights as a Jew matters more than the rights of Arabs.
Yep.
Me and my family's right. It's like, that is... I do not see a difference between that and saying we are the master race. I do not see a difference.
No difference.
The founders of Israel said some crazy shit. There's insane quotes.
So
those guys.
One of the silver linings, to the degree that there is one in this, is the degree to which people go, okay, you know what? When bullshit happens in a country like Israel, we can call it out for what it is and not sit here and go, oh, well, I don't want to be labeled an anti-Semite or whatever. It's like, it's so... It is like we were talking about how the word gaslighting is thrown around too much, but it's like, listen, if to criticize genocide. No, we weren't. What are you fucking talking about? To criticize genocide, to criticize war crimes, and perhaps genocide is too strong of a word. This is the problem. This is the problem with this issue in particular. I, as all of us, I'm sure, in the same boat, do not fucking have any idea what the truth is on the ground.
Sure.
So it's very difficult. All I can do, all I can do is take in information from people who I regard as trustworthy. And this issue in particular has split the political landscape so 50-50 down the middle, in that there are very intelligent people, not to sound like Trump, on both sides of this, but like truly, there's like 40 or 50 people who I normally am like, okay, on any given issue, I trust these people. They're split on this 100%, 50, or 50-50 rather. So it's like, but just Israel has all the power in this scenario compared to Gaza.
Yeah.
And so the responsibility is theirs to exercise restraint. And then you say, well, how dare you ask Israel to exercise restraint after what happened to them?
They have a right to defend themselves.
Exactly. I wish people had told the United States to exercise restraint after what happened in 9/11.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
for sure.
To me, a slight difference in my thinking, the way you just phrased that, is like, well, but the United States didn't ask any other country to help them do the shit after 9/11. Because, like, if Israel wants to respond in a way after a terrorist attack, in my mind, for the most part, it's like, that's not any of my fucking business. Whatever terrible shit goes on, I don't know enough to cast a judgment one way or another. But I certainly don't think that Canada or the United States should be
okay, but that's a problem.
Obliged to involve ourselves.
That scenario does not exist. Whatever
well,
Israel
you just brought
does,
up the 9/11 example. It's like, well, after 9/11, the United States did some terrible stuff, but it would have been worse if we were. Well, I guess they did group in like Canada and UK, so maybe it's a bad example.
Yeah, Tony Blair,
millions and
but
millions
that makes it worse
civilians.
that they brought in these other countries to like do shit. It's like, this isn't your fight, to the degree it was even America's fight in that.
There's no scenario where Israel can do what they can do and not bring in the United States, because they have a significant degree of influence over our foreign policy.
Yeah.
So there is no scenario where they can do whatever they want. We don't get involved. Whatever they do, we get involved in. And that's the fundamental problem, is just blind support. And I think that's ridiculous.
That is the problem to me. It's like, well, that shouldn't be the case.
If it was the UK, and the UK, I don't, if this is a ridiculous parallel, but if England started doing shit to Ireland, we stand with the UK no matter what they do. Yeah. It's like, what? Why? Why don't we examine the situation on the ground?
Yeah. I mean, the thing that pisses me off about this issue is people's seeming inability to just have a common sense, consistent moral position. It feels like everybody's either like, if you criticize what Israel does in any way, that is considered anti-Semitic, and if you criticize Hamas, then you're a Zionist shill or whatever. Yeah. That why can't people just have a consistent moral framework that civilian deaths are bad, that human life has value, and that both what Hamas did was horrible, and you should not go to bat for them in any way, and the IDF's response is also horrible and completely what is the term? It is not a proportionate response, right? That it seems like that take is so common sense to me, but people online are so divided, and you have to back one side or the other, and that's just not. I feel like we lose the plot whenever we start saying that some lives have more value than other lives, and we just accept massive civilian casualties because all we care about are the civilizations surviving. And I kind of take the position of the late Chris Hitchens, rest in peace. That he said that Israel has a right to exist, absolutely. But if the UN and Britain and the Zionists wanted to pick the worst possible spot in the world to establish it that would ensure a century of bloodshed, they did a good job at picking the most insane spot that they could have.
Describe to me in more detail what you mean when you say they have a right to exist. What do you mean by that?
That I think that the Jewish people have a right to a homeland, given the history of them being kicked out of so many countries, given the Holocaust. I mean, given all these things. And of course, that line can gets overplayed by Zionists at times. But I think they deserve a homeland somewhere. That's fine. I think to take mandatory Palestine that existed under Britain after the Ottoman Empire collapsed, ship all of the Jews down there, establish the state of Israel over the settlements of Arabs, kick out 700,000 of them whenever they understandably fought back over being having their land taken from them. Mm-hmm. I just think that there were Zionists that wanted to put Israel in Alaska. That was possible thing.
Uganda,
right?
And then Argentina was the other one.
Yeah, so
they picked the worst possible
They picked the
one.
worst spot that was going to ensure a century of bloodshed and tragedy on both sides.
Because like when I hear that phrase, all I hear is ethno-state, and like I wouldn't support an ethno-state for any other ethnicity.
Because the argument is, well,
so that
they
seems
have a
odd
right.
to me.
The Jewish people have a right to a homeland because of all the oppression they've went through. Hold on. Explain that logic to me.
Let's
I'm not even
tease
saying
that
you
logic
per
out.
se,
Sure.
Yeah.
but like because that's what Malcolm X argued about black people. They should have got their own like country. They were going to go to Malcolm X's plan was to go to the UN to advocate for a separate like black state in the United States, which like on the face of it at the time was not an insane idea. In hindsight, obviously that's kind of ridiculous, but that's also it's like okay, what that's kind of the point is we can look backwards and say like. Why, unless you believe that being Jewish is somehow fundamentally different from being a non-Jewish, which absolutely the radical strains of Judaism do believe that, which is part of the problem. And people say, well, it's the Jewish Zionist project is secular. It's like I don't buy that in the same way that I don't buy. I have the Petersonian perspective on like. When I'm not religious, it's like okay, but all of your morals and all of your sensibilities are conditioned by a religious framework. So this idea that seculars are saying, well, we had a tie to the land 3,000 years ago. It's like, that's a religious argument as far as I'm concerned. Sure. If you're invoking your ties to the past 3,000 years ago, or even a collective identity, as soon as you start appealing to this, our people, it's like, well, hold on. You're human. We're people or whatever. It's like, well, who is drawing these lines around who is your people and who's not? Because I view people, it's cliche and all that shit, which is unfortunate, but it's like, you know what? It's my fellow Americans, right? It's like, if some, Jewish black or whoever was killed, it's like, well, you know what? You killed fucking Americans, okay? And, oh, well, this cheesy bastard. It's like, don't you know we should be separating by ethno? It's like, no, fuck that. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I don't support the concept of ethno-states, and that's one of the reasons that I'm not a big fan of Israel as a country as it currently exists and is run. What I mean is more like if people through free association want to form a country together, and especially if they had a homeland, it was taken from them through thousands of years of crazy ass shit, and then they want to come back together, that's fine. My long-term vision, which what will eventually happen is all the races will blend and cultures will blend, and we will just become one giant like people.
I agree. It's so funny that there are a lot of people who are like, I want my great great-great-great-grandchildren to be white. It's like, really? I would rather they have my epic sense of humor than my fucking skin color. You know what I mean? It's like
our values.
And it's so funny because yes, it's and it's just like, and that is why I detest radical Judaism. If you are willing to criticize radical Christianity, which you should, if you're willing to criticize radical Islam, which you should, you should hold the exact same standard for radical Judaism.
No.
Right. Exactly. So it's a fucking meme. That's what I'm saying. Is like,
well, that goes back. To
each one just to finish it. Like they're all extreme form of anything is bad, but we have to differentiate how they are bad. Like Christianity has absurd stuff around abortion and whatnot. I believe Islam is less strict on abortion. I could be wrong, but like the doctrines are different. The extreme interpretations are all bad, but they're bad in different ways. And Judaism in particular happens to be a very radical Judaism lends itself to highly ethno-supremacist interpretations, just like radical Islam lends itself to martyrdom and all that, and radical Christianity lends itself to, Christian nationalism and bullshit like that. So
yeah, I think that goes back to the point of people poisoning the rhetorical well, right? Because if there's enough people that criticize a group out of bigotry, and that happens for decades and decades and decades. Eventually, if you criticize certain aspects of that group and you're careful to caveat it, that can still come across with insufficient caveats and framing that might get lumped in with the people that were bigoted. And that was one of the problems going to happen in the in the wake of 9/11. There was the new atheist movement was founded on basically because of 9/11. That's a big thing that made it happen. And there was a lot of, they argued against Christianity, but there was a lot of arguing against Islam as well, which is good. But the critique that people make of the new atheist movement was some of it felt like there was insufficient caveating and a lack of reading the room when it came to the rise of anti-Muslim, kind of Middle Eastern people sentiment. The hate crime rate was going up. At that same time, you're having these people lambast Islam, which is, again, I support that, but you just have to be very, very careful to differentiate yourself from a movement that might use very similar rhetoric for more sinister purposes. And I don't fault people like Sam Harris for that, because I'm a big fan of Sam Harris, but that is the criticism, and I can see a version of that is reasonable.
Yes.
That we just got to be careful.
One of the most morally decrepit culprits in this whole situation are the actual like Nazi anti-Semite creeps who hang out in their mom's basement, because they're the ones who have poisoned the ability of sane people to levy reasonable criticism against Israel
100%,
to begin with.
100%.
So every moral failure you make echoes. And in this regard, oh, well, I'm super anti, if you're a fucking actual Nazi that wants to wipe out Israel, oh, here's my chance to, get people to criticize Israel. It's like, your insanity is what prevents people from being able to criticize Israel freely, because you've now fed the caricature that everyone who criticizes Israel is anti-Semitic and all that bullshit. It's like,
absolutely. And that's why it's annoying.
Fuck the extremists.
It's annoying, but that's why we have to caveat our statements and criticisms.
True.
And it sucks. It's sad because you can caveat all day and people will still take you out of
right.
context.
And that's the other thing too, is like at a certain point, it's like, you know what? No, I'm going to criticize Israel as it stands as a state. You want to accuse me of whatever bullshit, I'm more than comfortable in telling you how ignorant you are if you think that the average person who's criticizing Israel is doing so from the same framework as the, creep in their mom's basement who is 4chan memeing fucking swastikas.
In some ways, is that the fault of the way that like legacy media has portrayed these kinds of arguments? They have been such shining a spotlight on real anti-Semitism and like Nazi sentiment amongst extremists, and failing to show that there's any degree of criticism you can have for Israel. So the audience walks away with well, the only people who have anything bad to say about the way that the Israeli government works are these guys.
Right.
Yeah.
It's is there some blame to be levied there?
Equally, yes. And I would say MSNBC, Mehdi Hassan, you know who that is? Mehdi Hassan?
Yep.
He talked for years about how Israel has a far-right government. I dismissed that as nonsense because you know what else Mehdi Hassan said was far-right? Was Donald Trump. Now, is Donald Trump have his share of flaws? Next topic we're going to talk to.
No.
In about a few minutes. No, he's perfect. Is he a true American? But if you're going to sit here all day and say Donald Trump's a far-right fascist, you're
spending your capital.
Exactly. You lose the ability then to identify unironic, actual far-right psychopaths like Itamar Ben-Gvir, who has the picture of Baruch Goldstein in his living room, the mass shooter. It's like,
it's like
so fuck Mehdi Hassan for abusing that fucking word of far-right fascists to the point where, oh shit, we actually should have seen that coming. Yeah, because Donald Trump compared to Itamar Ben-Gvir is a progressive.
There's a lot
SJW or whatever you want to say. Yeah. It's that's what I'm saying. Everyone is to blame. The extremists, anyone who abuses language for their own purposes.
Yeah, it's like save room for your 10. That's what I heard it put back in the day.
That's a brilliant way to put
your
it.
10.
Save room for your 10.